Good morning or afternoon, depending on your spatial coordinates. I'm Ron McCormick. I'm a complex systems ecologist currently serving as the National Soil Scientist for the Bureau of Land Management. I'm located within the Forestry Range and Vegetation Division of headquarters and working out of the Oregon State Office. So let's talk a little bit about what the BLM has been up to. The BLM's O&C lands offer for sale and produce a lot of logs for commercial use. That leaves us with numerous piles of slash that need to be burned in place. This creates staffing issues, air quality concerns, and offers a potential wildfire hazard. In cooperation with the U.S. Forest Service, we completed a small test to produce biochar using portable air curtain burner. The picture in the lower right shows most of what resulted, just the small pile in front, not the rocks in the back. We distributed the biochar on already replanted burned areas to at a high, low, and zero concentration just to assess seedling survival. And actually, some of our first monitoring is going to take place in the next few weeks. We're actually looking to develop a commercial partner to produce biochar for us, but we need to work on getting committed staff time this year and also getting full support of office management. One growing set of requests from our producers is that they want the BLM to issue a waiver that says we will not claim any soil carbon sequestration credits on their specific lease grazing lands. This comes from there are a lot of third-party carbon brokers that have been offering to help grazing permittees improve range, monitor carbon storage, and then share in the profits by entering into carbon trading markets. As the number of these requests have increased since 2021, we've developed some general guidance for our field district and state offices. The first option is to just not issue a waiver. As a federal agency, we can't enter into carbon market agreements, and so we could never claim the credits anyway. So as long as the conditions of your grazing permit is met or followed, there's nothing preventing producer from entering into a third-party agreement. As an assurance that the BLM has no claim, we can just issue a waiver that says that and have no other conditions on it. What I have advocated for is that we issue waivers with conditions that we request any data or information from the range activities and monitoring as a useful bit of knowledge that could help us with general range improvement across our 150 plus million acres of grazing lands. So, as the theme of this year's meeting starts with welcome to the neighborhood, let's see what's happening with our BLM neighbors. Previously, each BLM state office could establish operational MOUs with each state NRCS office. So in an effort to provide a more efficient and uniform cooperative environment, we signed a bureau-wide MOU with the NRCS last year, outlining how we can share staff, data, and information. We've also been providing interim feedback on the first 2 years of work being done by USGS and university researchers on developing approaches to incorporate shifts in fire and climate regimes with the hope of making ecological site groups more dynamic and responsive to changing management needs. To help move the ESG development process along, we're also working with Jama Johansson and Chris Talbot to use Dr. Travis Nauman's generic ecological site group key to create draft ESGs for areas that do not have anything yet. These draft products can be tested by any of our field staff, but we have also asked the USGS to intersect our BLM AIM data with these draft products, sort of as a first cut at verifying or refuting the validity of the drafts, and also to point out what additional refinement work is needed. So these are the priority MLRAs that the BLM has a need for ecological site work. And so as we move into the final phases of Soils 2026, we've been assisting the NRCS with some tasks outstanding. Initially, right now, we're working on finishing up English editing tasks on the ESDs that are otherwise ready to go live. I'm currently working on 28.8 as we speak. So the second half of the theme is living and working with partners on the land. Everyone here knows about or has issues with staffing, funding research, field implementation support, general logistical issues. Since 2016, the Federal Lands Advisory Group, FLAG, which you'll be hearing about later in this session, has been working to improve partnerships within the land management and research community. So the cooperative part of the National Cooperative Soil Survey world is really vital at this point in time. I'd like to finish with some reminders of how we can learn to better understand, live, and work with our partners. I'd like to highlight two papers that address the why and how-to elements of living and working with partners who may have very different visions of desired future social and landscape conditions. Right around the time that FLAG started, a colleague of mine and I looked at how issues were assessed and what policies came from that process. A lot of policy is urgent, short-term, common sense focused, but that leads to unintended consequences and increasingly unforeseen problems as a result. So we know what the answer is, let's get to work, is often heard in meeting rooms, boardrooms, and tap rooms. As we point out in 42 though, taking the time to ask the right questions about how we manage societal actions within a self-organizing global biome will better serve us in the long run as managers and stakeholders and citizens of the planet. To that end, I worked with several colleagues to develop the ICAS platform for the landscape conservation cooperatives. There's that word again, cooperative. It would take a long time to go through this, but effectively, it is not a how-to guide. It's not step 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's you need to use strategic design and spatial design and convening stakeholders and assessing conditions, but you don't have to do it in that order, and you don't have to do it all at the same scale at the same time. So it's a platform that says you need to do all these things. Start where you feel comfortable with it, but eventually try and hit all the other elements. Be innovative as part of the process, be inclusive, interdisciplinary, interactive, and informative. It's giving you the words and the tools that you can then use to organize yourself and your groups and come up with desired future conditions for your landscapes. So before any questions, I'd like to put in a shameless plug for the Oregon Society of Soil Scientists. This is from our last field trip where we had old hands and new faces in the pits. And of course, the standard standing lunch where you're listening to some guy in a hat talk about at the next site. But also returning to my biochar discussion, talking about the effects of burning slash piles on soil, as you can see down in the bottom center picture. So thank you for your attention, and I will answer any questions.
Hi, my name is Andy Coulter, and I oversee the National Soil Program for the U.S. Forest Service, as well as co-lead the Terrestrial Ecological Inventory Program with Joanne Baggs, the National Ecologist. A few highlights that the soil program is currently working on is one, to support the soil resource in the field. The Forest Service has experienced quite a bit of turnover in personnel in the last 6 months, and so we are looking at repositioning resources to fill critical soil positions in the field to continue to meet the priorities of the current administration. We are continuing to do soil training by utilizing in-field soil camps and through partner trainings. We are also looking at land management and how that affects soil productivity. And so we continue to support research, monitoring, and mapping by the field units, research and development of the Forest Service, as well as NRCS in activities such as the Forest Soil Disturbance Monitoring Protocol, long-term soil productivity, dynamic soil properties, and lastly, soil moisture. A couple of the highlights that have happened in the last year is one, we've been able to finalize the database finally for the long-term soil plots data. These plots go back over 30 years, but we never had a central location to house the information. And so we've been successful in building a database, and we plan to make this public so that folks outside the Forest Service will have access to this data too, if they so choose. And lastly, we've also been able to modernize the database for the Forest Soils Disturbance Monitoring Protocol. This is huge because this will now make it easier for the folks in the field that collect the data, as well as input that into the database, and to be able to make better resource decisions with that information. And so with that, you can see that the soil program is still very much active within the Forest Service, and we continue to look forward to being a continued partner within NCSS. And with that, thank you and have a great day.
So my name is Joanne Bax. I'm an ecologist in the Washington office working with Andy Coulter on our ecological inventory mapping program. I'm going to give an update on two of our efforts that we're finishing up. We work with a great team, including Sarah Anderson, who is our terrestrial condition assessment coordinator, and Estella Smith in the geospatial office. Several other folks may be familiar to you on our team, including Greg Nowacki, who is the regional ecosystem mapping leader for the Eastern region, and prior to his retirement, Larry Ling. He used to be the national soil scientist and landscape ecologist and still volunteers with us. So I would like to update you on two projects we're just completing. The first one is a revision of the national EcoMap layers, the domains, the divisions, the provinces, sections, and subsections. This effort was originally started in the Eastern region with Greg Nowacki, but ended up covering the whole nation. To set some context for the update, this is related to our Terrestrial Ecological Unit Inventory, or TUI for those who speak in acronyms, and it's a process we use on National Forest Service land. This method produces a similar product to NRCS's ecological site descriptions, or ESDs, but both methods map ecological sites. Terrestrial Ecological Unit Inventory is part of the National Hierarchical Framework of Ecological Units published in 1993 by Dave Cleland, Peter Avers, Henry McNabb, and Mark Jensen. The polygon layer boundaries were updated in 2007. So the hierarchy is a way to map ecosystems at multiple scales, and if done correctly is in a nested hierarchy. And so we start with the broadest scale of ecoregions at the domain through the province level, and nested within them are the subregions as sections and subsections, the landscapes of land type associations or LTAs, and then those finest land units or ecological sites, the land types, and the land type phases. So we map from the finest units lumping up, but we also map at the higher units and go down. This effort started with the recommended changes to our domains, that top layer, and flowed down to the subsections. And generally, we tried to keep the same concepts mapped previously, but refined the polygon lines. However, there were some major changes. One of the major changes was an addition of the boreal domain, and this caused a revision to our number encoding systems. This is a quick map of the new divisions. It's very similar to the past mapping efforts. We are finishing up this project by adding attributes, and then we'll make the layers widely available for both domains, divisions, provinces, sections, and subsections. As I mentioned before, we map from the domain and move down the hierarchy so that the system is nested. In the field, we typically map at the finest scale the land type phase and land types, and then lump up to create the land type associations, and lump them to sections, etc. For the second effort, we decided to work in this messy middle and really map at the land type association level within our new sections and subsection levels. LTAs are an important analysis unit for us as it represents that landscape level assessment of ecological integrity or sustainability. The model and process we use results in the terrestrial condition assessment. One of the limitations we've found for TCA is that our LTAs or analysis units are limited to the National Forest Service lands, but many of our projects take an all lands approach. Examples of cross-boundary work would include the Joint Chiefs and the Collaborative Forest Landscape Restoration Program, and also include our priority landscapes that have been identified for investment in wildfire risk reduction treatments. We finished this project to increase the area that we can cover by LTAs by 300%, and that helps us represent our collaborative work that we do. We didn't remap areas with existing 2E LTAs, which include Arizona, New Mexico, and the work that they're doing across the Northeast. For this process, we used eCognition with national data sets for topography, geology, existing vegetation at the macro group level, and climate variables like actual evapotranspiration and climatic water deficit. We varied the weights and criteria section by section to best represent that landscape. We've also characterized those new landscapes, and this data should be publicly available soon. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself, Andy, or Sarah. Thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. I'm Jason Kenworthy with the National Park Service Geologic Resources Division here in Denver, Colorado. We are our headquarters or Washington level office, and I'm the branch lead for the Geologic Features and Systems branch. The branch includes our Geologic and Soil Resource Inventory program, which is why I'm here, along with hazards, paleontology, cave and karst, and national natural landmarks. I've been in this role since September of 2024. I've been with the division most of the last 19 years, primarily with the inventory program. I've been with the Park Service most of the past 24 years. This afternoon, we'll take a quick tour of the NPS scope and structure, check in on the status of soil survey across the Park Service, and revisit projects discussed during the 2023 NCSS meeting in Bismarck. And we'll close with a 2025 appropriate reality check. The National Park Service is one of the 4 primary federal public land management agencies, along with the Bureau of Land Management, Fish and Wildlife Service, here in the Department of the Interior, and our colleagues over at the U.S. Forest Service in the Department of Agriculture. Together, these agencies manage your federal lands that encompass more than a quarter of the land area of the United States. You can see the different mission statements, which represent the varied focuses of the agencies. The Park Service has the most conservation-focused mandate, with that term unimpaired leading the way. We also emphasize enjoyment, education, and inspiration, meaning that our mission includes getting people in to experience these special places. We certainly don't have any issue getting people to show up. 330 million visitors came to Park Service areas in 2024, and we set visitation records nearly every year. The National Park Service isn't just national parks like Yosemite or Acadia. There are 433 sites, or what we call lowercase p parks, with parks ranging in size from 0.02 of an acre in downtown Philly, that's Thaddeus Kosciuszko National Memorial, to Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve, which spans 13.2 million acres in Alaska. You can see the nearly 24 different designations, which show both a somewhat comical side effect of a century-old government agency, but it really reflects how many different ways people connect to these different places, different landscapes, and the types of values that we hold for them. You can see battlefields, recreation areas, rivers, historic sites, reserves, monuments, memorials, trails, parkways, and more. For these parks, their location is critical to their story, and their location is, of course, a connection to the soils and ecologic sites. Our parks extend from above the Arctic Circle to below the equator, Puerto Rico to Guam, around 2 oceans, multiple gulfs, seas, the Great Lakes. Every conceivable physiographic setting from the highest point in North America to the lowest. Our management needs means that we are, or should be, avid consumers of NCSS developed soil and ecological site data and information in all of its flavors and uses, and includes linear extensibility, erosion susceptibility, any sort of stability, things related to siting or maintenance of infrastructure, trails, roads. The visitor support footprint in large parks creates small cities worth of developed areas. We have natural hazards, post-event response, bear teams, burned area, emergency response, coastal zones, archaeological investigations, cultural landscapes, agriculture, historic orchards dating back centuries to farms dating back millennia. We have grazing allotments, urban soils, wilderness areas, landscape restoration needs, historic vegetation, all while ensuring that the charismatic flora and fauna, big trees and black brown bears, the people come to enjoy are functioning and resilient. And we're also here for all the ways that that info is developed. Web soil survey, interpretations, PDFs, dynamic soil properties, state transmission models, all the digital delivery and access methods you have, bring them on. Now, if this sounds overwhelming, I am with you. This is a lot to manage, especially when some parks have less permanent staff than you can count on one hand. That's where our regional support offices, there are 7 you can see here, provide expertise and capacity to parks in their region. There are also 14 national programs, that's WASO, Washington Support Office, that provide support to all parks. And that's where I fit in. It's part of the Geologic Resources Division of the WASO, Natural Resource Stewardship and Science Directorate. Also, NRSS provides direct technical and policy assistance, funding, where we facilitate partnerships for parks in 4 key areas. We help parks hold the line, answering those day-to-day, here and now management challenges. For soils, think things like hazards, response, or facilities maintenance and construction. We help parks manage for continuous change, think dynamic soil properties, sea level rise, temperature changes, different moisture regimes. We help parks manage for conservation at scale, like the theme of this conference suggests. We need partnerships because soils and ecological sites don't follow the green lines on the map. And we support parks with science access and engagement, ensuring parks know what is available to them via the Park Service data store, but also those non-NPS authoritative sources like Web Soil Survey. So with regards to soils then, WASO has gotten by with a lot of help from our friends at NCSS over the past quarter century. From 1999 to 2019, we funded circa mapping for nearly 240 parks through the Soil Resource Inventory Program. That park also hosted access databases and other park-specific products that were developed until 2013. The program lead retired. Since then, the inventory has been added to the Geologic Resources Inventory, so our primary goals have been to wrap up mapping efforts, ensure access to SURGO, Web Soil Survey, and its associated interpretations. We connect parks and other offices with NCSS partners that can provide more direct support. We collaborate with the NRCS Federal Lands Advisory Group, and we've set up agreements as part of the NCSS, including with West Virginia University to pilot dynamic soil survey techniques, and with an agreement with NRCS to improve soil data access to NASA's via our NPS data store. We also support a new inventories program, which we'll talk about shortly. Back in 2023 in Bismarck, here's the status of SURGO data availability for Park Service areas. We had 382 parks had complete coverage, 20 with partial, and then 19 with no data or not complete. Fast forward to now, and we have 401 parks with SURGO data, 26 with some, and only 10 without. This difference from 2023 to 25 reflects the completion of the final big 3 field mapping projects funded by the Park Service, including Olympic National Park, Sequoia Kings Canyon National Parks, and Mojave National Preserve. Also, Alaska went totally green, which is huge. So we found through conversations across WASO and parks, managers like to see all the data that a map can provide, but their faces really brighten when they discover the scores of interpretations available in Web Soil Survey. Based on interviews with 30 people across multiple WASO offices, Presidential Management Fellow Sharon Perrone identified more than 40 interpretations of particular applicability to Park Service. The titles of those interps are listed here in a word cloud format, and you can right away see items that would get the attention of park staff. Hazards, potential, what could happen, subsidence, erosion, things like that. These off-the-shelf interpretations provide quick insights and show park managers and planners areas that may need additional attention or information. Now, this sort of suitability modeling has also been requested by the Park Service for custom models that incorporate SURGO and geologic map data, things like ginseng habitat for parks along and near the Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina and Virginia, where poaching is an issue. The biggest change in our WASO program since 2023 has been the evolution of our inventories program from baseline map focused to management need based. From the late 90s to now, our geology and soil inventories were focused on funding, creating, delivering baseline digital maps at park-wide scale. We aim for SURGO level or about 1 to 24,000 scale when we could. Every natural area park got one, whether they asked for it or not. And we're nearly done with this phase, as shown in the prior slide for soils. Big shout out to Soils 2026. Geology is similarly wrapping up this baseline phase this year. So what's changed? In 2024, WASO NRCS consolidated its natural resource inventory and natural resource condition assessment programs. We restructured the funding and proposal model and integrated it into the same call for proposals that parks already use. Our goal now is to be able to provide inventory and assessment data and information directly to parks that need it for some specific management priority. Projects can be proposed by any of the 433 NPS areas, not just those original 270 natural area parks. Projects have need-based areas of interest, not just park-wide projects, and proposals can include geology and soils. And of particular interest for everyone here at the NCSS, partners will be selected to do most of the project work. How's it all going? Well, we're not entirely sure yet. The first batch of projects was just ranked and reviewed a few months ago. We're hoping to get 3 geology projects funded later this year. The soil-specific projects, I'm sure, will come. A few months after the Bismarck meeting, Sharon Prone finalized her State of the Soils information at National Park Service WASO level report. It outlined the barriers and opportunities at WASO related to soils information. Currently in GRD, soils is a collateral duty. We have limited knowledge about SURGO, accessing and visualizing soils data. There's limited general soils knowledge to apply to specific disciplines and projects. And the Park Service agency structure is different from other land management agencies. We're more siloed and have a bottom-up hierarchy. We call that Park Forward, where central offices have more of a support rather than a leadership role. And while we've mostly spent the past 2 years overhauling the inventory and assessment program, we have been able to start developing outreach and training materials. We fostered additional relationships and interagency agreements like the ones I mentioned, and we've been bringing soils information into new platforms. And particularly, this includes using soils information on our natural hazards checklist, the Bureau Investment Review Board, which is for new facilities projects, and adding to our baseline geology and soil resource inventory summary documents. So as our time together today wraps up, where are we with regards to soil surveys in WASO NPS? We have access to more data and information than we've ever had. We're wrapping up those early relationships with the NCSS, filling in those not-com areas and providing parks with usable soil information. With Soils 2026 marking that push to get complete coverage across the country, 2026 will also mark the close of our in-progress agreements with West Virginia University and NRCS. And 2026 will see the start of park-specific geology projects as part of the new inventory and assessment program. So the reality is that our office in the National Park Service is we have all this data and all these opportunities to overcome those barriers to the use of that data and information. But y'all, it's 2025. You're facing more and more extremes, from the visitation we talked about earlier, to climatic extremes, and now, I guess what could be called administrative extremes. For many of us here, the N and the C in NCSS, in 2025, could be referring to no certainty regarding positions, agreements, and funding. National Park Service staff numbers have been declining for years. This is not a new phenomenon, although the recent pace is atypical. For example, for fiscal year 2025, our office began with an org chart with 50 current or planned positions and included all of our university partners and interns. At the end of the year, we'll have 25 people. That's not just the NPS. Each of you is probably feeling some level of uncertainty these days. So the reality of all this is that we really have to look at how to actually do less with less. That doesn't mean that we abandon our mission. It's that we really have to work on carefully selecting those management actions that allow us to support resilient soils and ecology, but also to support resilient staff with manageable workloads. In other words, let's fully embrace the theme of this conference that espouses neighbors and partners working together on the land. Cullen Sheeland, who's a geologist in our program, did some GIS analysis and looked at what agencies were directly adjacent to NPS areas, our neighbors, along the nearly 14,000 miles of NPS boundaries in our service-wide boundary file. 85% of that was either Bureau of Land Management land, various types of state lands, U.S. Forest Service, or American Indian reservations. Those are all 4 groups that are well represented here at the NCSS. For us, that can change the N and the C from no certainty to new chemistry. At the WASO level, our fundamental understanding of soils has come from the products and people of the NCSS, and our ability to manage the soils that support the ecological areas 330 million visitors and counting come to experience. We've never not needed a partnership that the NCSS provides, and now in the future, the national and cooperative, the actual N and the C in NCSS, are absolutely critical for us, because we cannot do this by ourselves. So finally, I just want to end with a note of sincere gratitude. Thank you so much to my colleagues at the Federal Lands Advisory Group, especially Tiffany Allen from NRCS, Ron McCormick from BLM, Andy Coulter from the Forest Service. You all have been really patient with this geologist and soils noob. Huge thanks to Jericho Winter, Ron Reuter, the NCSS Planning Committee. This year we've had to pivot from in-person location to fully virtual. Thanks also to Presidential Management Fellows John Andreoni and Sharon Perone, who, while they have moved on from NRCS, have contributed so much to my and WASO's understanding the soil survey. And thank you all for your time and your energy to participate in this conference and to be here and share your expertise. Drop me a line anytime. Contact information is on the screen. Scan the QR code or head to go.nps.gov/geodiversity to snag all of our inventory products. Take care. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Greetings, National Cooperative Soil Survey Conference attendees. My name is Tiffany Allen, and I'm currently serving as the POC for the Soil and Plant Science Division, as the Associate Director for Soil Operations, as well as the National Resource Soil Scientist for Federal Lands. I'd like to share a little bit about myself before we jump into discussing the Federal Lands Advisory Group, or also known as FLAG, because I believe it set the foundation for me personally in my fundamental belief that partnership and collaboration fosters innovation, enhances inventory and decision making, creates a robust and agile and efficient workforce, and ultimately enhances our collective ability to provide assistance to customers directly. We are helping people help the land. I started my full-time career after graduating as an 1890 USDA scholar in Asheville, North Carolina. Although the federal government-owned land is found mostly in half of the counties in North Carolina, the majority of that land is concentrated in western region of the state, which is the greatest portion of MLRA 130B, also known as the Southern Blue Ridge. The top 5 counties in North Carolina with the most federal land are Cherokee, Graham, Haywood, Macon, and Swain, which represents around 720,000 acres of the federally owned land. This area is home to many national forests and is also home to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. In 2016, the Chimney Tops 2 fire was reported in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park near Gatlinburg, Tennessee. The wildfire was determined to be human-caused and began burning in a remote location of the park, also known as the Chimney Tops, in steep terrain with vertical cliffs and narrow rocky ridges, which made access to the wildfire area difficult for firefighting efforts. Exceptional drought conditions and extreme winds caused the wildfire to grow rapidly. The winds further increased throughout the days to a sustained 40 to 50 mile an hour winds, and in the evening gusts up to 87 miles an hour. That caused numerous wildfire starts from embers carried far in front of the main fire, as well as down power lines within Gatlinburg community. The fire in the park was approximately 11,000 acres, which is about 2% of the over 500,000 acres included in the park boundaries. Members of the burn area emergency response team contacted NRCS and the Soil Plant Science Division to assist with determining the soil burn severity. It was the first time in my career participating on a team of scientists across multiple federal agencies that was utilizing their particular skills and abilities to investigate, assess, analyze, and provide informed feedback that ultimately affects the very people we serve: the public, private land owners, farming communities, recreationists, fishing enthusiasts, hunters, and gatherers. I realized in that moment, during that particular opportunity, that partnership is everything, and it was all for a purpose. So let's talk about the Federal Lands Advisory Group. As you have heard now throughout the conference, the NCSS, National Cooperative Soil Survey, is a nationwide partnership of federal, regional, state, and local agencies, private entities, and institutions that cooperatively inventory, investigate, classify, interpret, disseminate, and maintain information about soil and ecological resources of the United States. Soil inventory activities facilitate data collection, mapping, interpretation, and ultimately delivery. The systematic process is designed to maintain or modernize official soil survey information and improve the consistency and quality of the mapping, correlation decisions, data, interpretations to meet and keep up with ever-evolving NCSS standards. It provides seamless information on soils, ecological states, and climate across broad geographic areas that have common resource values, land uses, and management concerns. Most noteworthy, however, is that the inventory process is driven by collaboration with NCSS partners. These partners are on our technical teams and management teams and direct all aspects of planning and fieldwork. The Federal Lands Advisory Group, or FLAG, is a subset team of the national leaders and federal land managers, and was established for the purpose of facilitating in the development and maintenance of the soil and vegetation inventories of the nation's federal lands. This working group is together in association with other partners in the National Cooperative Soil Survey and leverages these relationships to enhance customer service, as well as enhancing and prioritizing data and information delivery directly to the public. The objectives of FLAG have evolved over time. However, it was established to improve communication and coordination, develop cooperative solutions and processes for soil and vegetation inventories of the nation, to develop common priorities and a common plan that ensures the effective use of agency resources while recognizing the unique missions and objectives of each agency, and to share this information with our respective agencies as a guide for cross-collaboration and rules of engagement. FLAG is a national level group whose membership includes those federal agencies actively participating in the soil and ecological inventories of the U.S. These include, but are not limited to, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Land Management, Department of Defense, Forest Service, National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and National Resources Conservation Service. Current leadership of FLAG includes Ron McCormick, soil ecologist with BLM, Robert Coulter, also known as Andy Coulter, National Soils Program Leader for the U.S. Forest Service, Joanne Baggs, landscape ecologist for the Forest Service, Jason Kenworthy, geologic features and system branch lead for an NPS, and myself representing NRCS and SPSD. We also have other national leaders such as Jamin Johansson, National Leader for Ecological Sites, Francine Laretier, National Resource Soil Scientist for Dynamic Soil Properties, Sky Wills, National Leader for Soils Research, Stephen Roker, he's our POC, or point of contact for soil business systems, currently the leader of soil business systems. Dave White, POC, as National GIS Specialist, digital soil mapping expert. And Alex Stum, GIS Specialist and Soil Scientist for soil business systems. We also have Corey Owens, our awesome facilitator, as part of our FLAG team. Throughout the conference, you are going to be hearing about all the extraordinary partnership projects and activities. Many of these activities are accomplished through the 3 national memorandums of understanding with NPS, Forest Service, and BLM. The purpose of each MOU is to document and guide collaboration throughout the life cycle of soil surveys, ecological unit inventories, and related technical assistance. FLAG leaders share common goals and interests in land resource conservation and management, utilizing the latest science and policy to help guide the sustainability of the nation's lands. Soil properties influence both natural landscapes and ecosystems, as well as human-managed areas in parks such as agricultural areas. Example, there are some park-significant fields or orchards within National Park Service. What about campgrounds and trails, roads, visitor centers, and other infrastructure? Information on soils is needed by federal land managers, planners, engineers, and scientists in order to protect water quality, wetlands, vegetation communities, and wildlife habitats. Technical or derived soil information conveys fundamental factors that strongly influence management decisions, like control of exotic species or planning and maintenance of high-use areas. Considering the broad responsibilities of each agency, it is desirable and mutually beneficial to cooperate on data collection, development, distribution, and utilization phases of soil and ecological inventory activities that ultimately provides customer-driven deliverables. The goals set forth by this group are clear. We communicate, we collaborate, we're transparent, and we provide guidance for agencies to successfully accomplish mutually beneficial customer-driven products that protect our nation's natural resources. The National Geospatial Data Assets goal, which we are all part of, is to implement a systematic and efficient portfolio management process that supports and optimizes investments in federal geospatial assets for effective sharing, collaboration, and use of core geospatial data across federal agencies and with their partners and stakeholders in an environment that supports efficient and effective decision-making. Essentially, this tells us that collaboration is expected amongst federal partners to improve data sharing, privacy, and transparency for appropriate use of data. We are required to utilize data already available by NCSS federal cooperators, saving important taxpayer dollars and agency time to accomplish agency goals. As we look towards the future, we know there is much work to be done. We will need new MOUs to outline how we engage with each other, how we collaborate with each other, what products and deliverables are needed to achieve the mission of our respective agencies, and most importantly, how we utilize our collective resources to achieve our individual agency priorities while using agreed-to standards set forth by the National Cooperative Soil Survey. We will have our unique deliverables that are agency-defined and dependent. However, our inventory processes and collection standards are enhanced when we are working together and everyone has an equal seat at the table. These conversations, they're not easy, but in the end, the National Cooperative Soil Survey will need this level of buy-in, agreement, and transparency in order to answer the call for an innovative, collaborative, efficient, and customer-driven future. We need more people to get involved in FLAG as we look towards the future. With that said, please feel free to reach out to myself or any of the FLAG leaders. Thank you all and enjoy the conference.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren Brazzi, an education specialist with the Education and Outreach Department at the American Geosciences Institute. I'm thrilled to talk with you all today about the growing partnership between AGI and NRCS. Together, we're working to bring soils into classrooms and teachers out into the field to increase awareness of the vital role soils play in our world and to inspire interest in soil-related careers. Let me start by giving a bit of background on AGI. AGI is a nonprofit organization that represents and serves the geoscience community. We provide collaborative leadership and accessible information to connect earth science and people. The organization is structured into 3 main departments: education and outreach, workforce, and scholarly information. AGI as a whole works with various partners, including federal organizations such as USGS, NASA, and NRCS, in addition to private companies, research groups, school systems, and even individuals. Specifically in the education and outreach department, our primary focus is working with K-12 teachers and education specialists. We create lessons, curricula, posters, and also provide support through professional development programs, in-person workshops, and conference sessions. One of the main initiatives of AGI's Education and Outreach Department is Earth Science Week, which is a national celebration of earth sciences. AGI selects a theme each year to facilitate and focus the celebration around a particular geoscience topic of interest. During Earth Science Week, there are also focus days, like Geologic Map Day, to help bring awareness to certain aspects of geoscience. AGI runs 4 contests and puts on a webinar series during Earth Science Week. People and organizations worldwide take part in Earth Science Week by hosting events, which you can see on the map of the 2023 celebration. Every year, AGI also creates resources and especially works with partners to collect and package 8,000 physical Earth Science Week toolkit, full of resources including posters, bookmarks, flyers, and more. These are distributed around the nation and actually globally. In 2022, AGI wanted to highlight the importance of soil on the Geologic Map Day poster that we were creating in celebration of Geologic Map Day. And we worked closely with the Soil Science Society of America and also with NRCS. That initial project sparked a broader collaboration that has continued through this day. Through this partnership, AGI and USDA NRCS are collaborating to engage teachers and students in understanding the importance of soils and bringing awareness to the related careers that students could pursue. We know organizations like SSSA, who is a member society of AGI, are doing excellent work in creating and sharing soil-related resources. AGI is working to expand the reach by amplifying the great resources already out there, by filling in gaps that may exist, and continue building community around soils education. We hope to do this and also accomplish the goals listed above by revising existing resources, creating new educational resources, and also developing some soil-related programming. At the start of our collaboration, I met with different regional communication groups to compile the existing NRCS resources from the different states. Many states and groups had resources to share, but I want to give a shout out to these listed as they shared the highest numbers. I added these NRCS resources to AGI's searchable database called Education Geosource under new NRCS curated collection, so the resources are all in one location, which AGI promotes. As we were compiling the existing NRCS resources, we noticed that some of the lessons could be updated, especially to be in line with current educational standards. Most states have adopted the Next Generation Science Standards, or NGSS. AGI has revised the 3 lessons listed below for NRCS. I especially had fun with the crayon making lesson with my 3-year-old as we made about 40 crayons to hand out to teachers at a conference and verified that the lesson really worked. While compiling and revising NRCS resources, we noted some potential material that would be worthwhile to highlight to educators and began creating new resources, which I'll go through quickly now. One of the tools we knew was essential to focus on is the Web Soil Survey. It contains such a wealth of valuable data and interpretations, and with today's educational standards emphasizing the use of real-world data, it was clear that we needed to help make this resource more accessible to teachers and even to students. In order to get teachers and students familiar with soil maps and Web Soil Survey, we have included them in the lessons listed here, which also all include a hands-on component to increase engagement with soil data that may not initially excite students. For example, in the Observing Impacts to Communities Built on Permafrost lesson, students model soil that contains permafrost with gravel and ice, and then build a model house on top which needs to be level. Then, students pour water over the model to simulate a warming climate and observe how the ground and their model house change. To take the lesson to the next level, we included a map of the permafrost sensitivity of Fairbanks, Alaska. Students were then asked to consider how they think a warming climate may impact the people of Fairbanks, and also how knowledge of soil properties and conditions might have influenced decisions while planning the city, or even moving forward to ensure a sustainable city. Once students and teachers have been exposed to soil maps, we think they would be more comfortable actually going into Web Soil Survey themselves to create soil maps. The introductory guide is a quick user guide that highlights the different features of Web Soil Survey and can be used by people of all ages. The other 3 guides are thematic and feature related soil data that is available and could be useful in the classroom. The guide walks through why these topics are important, the related data and interpretations that are available, how to get to them, with specifically calling out which buttons to push, example maps and explanations, and the guides also provide activity ideas for teachers to do with their students. The climate guide is available now, and the other 2 are planned to be released this fall. Throughout the NRCS AGI collaboration, we have developed and shared a variety of resources through Earth Science Week. In 2022, NRCS premiered a webinar to support the theme Earth Science for a Sustainable World. Then, in 2023, with the theme Earth Science Innovating for Earth and People, we developed 2 activity pages in collaboration. One highlighted urban agriculture, and the other featured a crossword puzzle showcasing the innovative use of Web Soil Survey. I've already mentioned the 2022 Geologic Map Day poster about soils, and in 2024, to celebrate the theme Earth Science Everywhere, Heather Emmons worked with us to create a poster that highlights various NRCS careers. This has been one of our most popular posters, and it disappears quickly at every event where we share it. This year, we're continuing to promote that poster, and we're also highlighting the Earth Team program as it celebrates its 40th anniversary. It's a great way for teachers and high school students to get involved in soil and make connections with local geoscientists. A new resource we created last year and are excited to create more of is the virtual field experience. Last year, I was in Platteville, Wisconsin at the North Central Regional Soil Survey Conference. I captured images using a 360-degree camera and created a virtual field experience using the Torrent platform. This allows anyone to feel like they attended the day out in the field and can learn not only about the soil in Platteville, but also about soil pits and what soil scientists make observation of. You can see on the screen the recording that shows some of the features of the Torrent platform that allow users to interact with the field sites. This specific tour takes viewers to 3 field sites where they can virtually get down into the soil pits, make observations, and listen in as professionals explain the sites. AGI created a quick handout that goes along with the virtual field experience so teachers can utilize the resource in the classroom. This year, through a program I'll talk more about in a bit, we will be in Oregon, and I plan to create another similar virtual field experience. This resource should be ready by early fall and available on our website soon. In order to spread the word about the great work that NRCS, SSSA, and other soil-related organizations are doing, the AGI Education and Outreach team to present at conferences. We typically lead 1-hour hands-on sessions that include introductory soil activities and Web Soil Survey instruction. In order to encourage others to share the great soil-related work they are doing, AGI has also started an ambassador program where teachers can apply for funds to attend conferences where they have been accepted to share out a soil-related poster or presentation. AGI offers to assist in the poster or presentation development and can help with preparations as much as possible. In addition to in-person, AGI has also shared soil-related activities and resources virtually, such as in the Earth Science Information Partners Out to Lunch webinar series. And through another project with the USGS, AGI facilitated an early career professionals in mapping webinar series where we featured 3 NRCS soil mappers. It was a wonderful way to promote NRCS and the great work that is being done by the organization and the young women featured in the webinars. Over the past 2 years, AGI has also started an initiative to get teachers out in the field and interacting with geoscientists. One program, the Teacher Field Experience, was piloted in the Chicago area where I am located with soil mappers from the Milwaukee office. We had 3 TFEs over the last year, and all were given rave reviews by the teachers and outreach specialists that attended. We plan to launch the program more widely this fall. Another component of the Geoscience Experiences for Teachers Out in the Field program is the Soil Science Workshop, which we started last year at the NCSS Regional Conference in Wisconsin. We brought 6 teachers to the conference where they listened in on about half of the talks, participated in educator breakout sessions in the Soils Lab at University of Wisconsin in Platteville, and attended the field excursions alongside conference attendees. The workshop was a huge success, and I want to personally thank Jen Smith and Chris Baxter for helping get the program started. This year, even though this conference was moved virtually, we are still having the Soil Science Workshop in person, and I'm actually traveling to Oregon State University at this very moment. We have a group of 8 teachers who are all thrilled to be learning about soils and visiting some interesting field sites this coming week. However, we are all a bit nervous for all of the pollen. Hopefully by now you are thinking, wow, there is so much great work being done by AGI. I wonder if I can get involved. I am so excited you are thinking that because we would love to work with you, and there are so many ways we can partner together. First, we can collaborate on an educational resource related to your work, because who doesn't love sharing what you do with others? You can also host a teacher field experience when you are already going out into the field. How easy is that? Just do your normal job, bring along a teacher that we at AGI have helped recruit, and go on about your day. Or you could work with us to create a more in-depth TFE for a group of teachers or outreach specialists that perhaps you repeat every fall. Another easy way to help promote soils with K-12 teachers and students is to actually go into the classroom. We can help facilitate these types of visits in addition to recommending some activities to do while you are in the classroom. And maybe you want to help, but you don't love the idea of interacting with kids or even adults. You could always advise and or review the soon-to-be released web soil survey guides. But maybe you would rather just share resources with us since you're short on time. That would be great. We can always utilize more pictures within lessons, and we also would love to help promote lessons and or programs that you've developed already. We can even work on revising some older lessons that maybe they had to be taken down off of websites when they were redone since they're not 508 compliant. AGI can help with that. And one more way to get involved is to do something for Earth Science Week, like potentially having your office host an Earth Science Week event where the community can come in and learn about what you do and maybe even play with some soil samples. There are so many ways to get involved in education and outreach, and AGI is here to support you. As we dangerously approach the 15-minute mark of this presentation, I want to thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope you will reach out to express your interest in working together in one of the ways I've listed, or in another way that you've thought of while listening to this presentation. Thank you again, and have a great rest of the conference.
Hi, my name is Jen Moore. I am a research soil scientist with the USDA ARS in Corvallis, Oregon at the Forage Seed and Cereal Research Unit. The title of my talk today is Unraveling Soil Health and Carbon Storage in Seed and Hop Production Systems. I was basically asked to explain how my role with ARS interacts with soils and specifically the soil survey. And I can say, spoiler alert, is that it's pretty much 100% interacting and intersecting with soils, and I rely heavily on information presented and provided by the soil survey team. Before I get into a lot of the details about my projects and program, a little bit about myself. I'm originally from New York. I studied and obtained my master's in soil science from Iowa State University, and my PhD in soil science from Oregon State. In between those 2 degrees, I worked at WSU's Tree Fruit Research and Extension Center in Wenatchee, Washington. After obtaining my PhD, I moved to Texas, and I was 7 years there, eventually obtaining tenure as a professor of soil and environmental microbial ecology. A few other roles I've held over the years includes 3 years as one of the soil health leads with the USDA NRCS Soil Health Division when it was initially established, and then I served for 2 years with an NGO, American Farmland Trust, as their National Climate Director. Finally, I've landed what I consider one of my ultimate dream jobs as a 100% research soil scientist, and have now been here in Corvallis for about 4 years. Before I also get started, I need to just acknowledge a lot of the different funding sources and a lot of the collaborators that has made this work really enjoyable and really rich in different disciplines and different expertise. I won't go bore you with listing off everybody, but suffice it to say there's a lot of different USDA, ARS scientists. We work closely with OSU, being co-located on campus here in Corvallis, graduate students, other extension and researchers from many different departments and colleges across the campus. All of the work in my lab is led by my technician, Kylie Meyer, and we rely heavily on a lot of assistance from student workers. These are primarily undergraduate research assistants, but we also have hired high school students over the years. And finally, none of the research could be conducted without our amazing collaborations with growers across the region. These include a variety of hop growers, grass seed growers, mint producers, and more recently, livestock operators. And so just to get us all on the same page, I like to define soil health and what I consider a healthy soil. So building on the definition that originated in the early 1990s and then later modified by NRCS, they define soil health as the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. I twist that around a little bit to use it as an adjective and define a healthy soil as that living system that supports that diverse, active biological community that aids crop production, which is what our focus is in the agricultural sector, by providing essential functions. And a lot of the work that we've done here in the grass seed systems in the Willamette Valley is highlighted in this fact sheet that myself and Dr. Christian Tripp put together in collaboration with some other individuals and our grower collaborators. And that is titled Grass Seed Crops Stewarding the Land by Sustaining the Soils. And it's a fact sheet about how important grass seed is in supporting soil health. And there's a lot of nice details and a couple case studies that I encourage you to check out. So over the years, in the last 4 years, I've been involved in a lot of different projects, some of which had already been in place when I arrived, and then others that we've initiated. And these include looking at residue management and tall fescue, the effect of tile drainage on soil health and carbon dynamics. We are currently conducting a hop soil carbon and soil health inventory, which hadn't been done before, with a specific emphasis on cover cropping. In collaboration with OSU scientists, I'm investigating how livestock and diverse forage mixes help to support animal, crop, and soil health, this three-way nexus. More recently, I'm getting involved in mint and mint compost residues, looking at those as a source of fertility and carbon storage. And then we just launched last year a pilot study looking at the effects of occasional tillage following long-term no-till fields and their effects during crop transition. And so What's really unique if you're not from the valley or familiar with grass seed production is that relative to annual crops, these grass seed production systems are more limited in the options to build soil carbon because perennial seed production naturally helps to protect the soil. It provides that continuous living root system with infrequent tillage practices. However, there are a number of different practices: residue management, integrating livestock into the system, using different crops in rotation with grass seed, installing tile drainage, and applying no-till or reduced tillage are potential pathways to increase carbon in soils. And so this has been the focus of our current research over the past 4 or 5 years since my arrival. Prior to my arrival, however, there were 2 really great studies that investigated how residue management impacts soil carbon storage in tall fescue systems. The first study was led by OSU researcher Dr. Betsy Verhoeven, where she conducted field surveys, again looking at the effects of fall straw load that had been returned versus straw baled and removed. These are all in tall fescue. And then that was followed up by a postdoctoral Dr. Martina Gonzalez Mato in collaboration with Dr. Kristen Tripp and Amber Moore. They expanded on Betsy's study to focus on young versus old systems and residue management. And then I had a more recent study where I investigated understanding the specifics about straw additions and their impacts on microbial communities and the rates that they degraded that carbon through different fractionation techniques in lab incubations. On the right-hand side, we can see this is a map of the valley, and this is Portland up in the north, Eugene down in the south, Corvallis is here basically in the middle, and the different points and colors represents 3 of the different studies that we've looked at. This also includes points for our tile drainage that I'll mention in a minute. However, the residue management in the tall fescue were 64 specific fields that again span the entire valley. And what they did was to focus heavily on data from the surveys that helped inform where they should meet their paired comparisons or constrain some of their sampling efforts. And what was really interesting is that despite their efforts to constrain and to kind of do paired comparisons, when we look individually at the studies, neither one of them resulted in a statistically significant effect of that full straw load return on soil carbon. However, what we did find is that when I came on board, we started looking, a lot of the trends were there, but they just weren't separating statistically. So we conducted hydrometer tests for texture and obtained clay content and used that in our model. We specifically used stand age in the model when we were exploring the effects of soil carbon based on returning straw versus baling. And we calculated everything and combined both data sets into one using an equivalent soil mass where we could adjust for the carbon content based on differences in bulk densities. And when we combined both of these studies, we did find that there was a significantly greater carbon under full straw return versus baled of approximately 6.1 metric tons per hectare. And so this just illustrates the importance of sample size, understanding and measuring soil texture, as well as management history. So the soil survey was a fantastic tool that helped us narrow where the samples were collected and gave us an indication of what textural class we were likely dealing with. But then we took that information, did the more in-depth laboratory analysis to help differentiate and get that statistical significance to be present. The next study is the effect of tile drainage. Again, we used the soil maps to identify where in the valley we should look. We targeted 2 different types of soils with a natural drainage classification of moderately well drained or poorly drained. These are poorly drained soils of the Dayton soil series, and moderately well drained, such as the Woodburn. We had 3 tile installation ages, the 0 control, so no installation. We had new, which was less than 5 years, and old, which was greater than 15 years. 5 replicates for each combination for a total of 30 fields. So here again, we used the surveys to identify where we could sample, constrain within that, and then we actually hired a soil classifier to come out with Dr. Lauren Briza to help make sure that she was sampling in specifically that moderately well-drained or poorly drained soil type. And what we discovered was that there was a very strong implication of whether carbon was affected by tile drainage by that initial natural drainage classification. So on the right-hand side in poorly drained, we have soil carbon in metric tons per hectare here, and then going down in the profile, it's again, everything's calculated on equivalent soil mass, and so that's in metric tons per hectare. Going down on the y-axis, you can move the decimal place 2 places to the left, and it's roughly equal to depth in centimeters. So 10 to 80 centimeters on this one, and 10 to 60 centimeters in the moderately well-drained soil. What we did find, though, is that in the moderately well-drained soil, there was a depletion of carbon at that following that initial installation of drainage within the past 5 years. But what we found was that as the system matured and those rooting systems were going deeper into the profile, they were replenishing that carbon that had initially been depleted, and there was no statistical difference between the old tile and the untiled. So again, that had implications to understand what type of natural soil drainage classification we were talking about, making sure, again, we measured clay content, because that was a strong covariant in both soil types, even though we were constraining within a soil type. And the time since drainage install were all key factors for proper interpretation of the effect of tile drainage. Moving on to our HOP carbon survey, as well as our soil health. Here's an example slide of our carbon data to date. And here on the left-hand side, we have data from the Willamette Valley, where there's been an early transition to cover cropping in the alleyways. It's relatively new, just a few years, compared to the Yakima Valley, where there's longer duration. Again, equivalent soil mass here on the y-axis, and the x-axis is the cumulative soil organic carbon stocks in metric tons per hectare. In the Willamette Valley, where the cover cropping hasn't been in place as long, the hops are actually storing more carbon. The hop rows, are storing more carbon than the alleyways, and that's significant down almost all the way to that about 50 or 60 centimeters. In Yakima, the opposite was true, where in the top 30 or so centimeters, we found that the alleys, which had been in place longer with cover cropping, had higher carbon content than the hop rows. And so we're interested in tracking this over time to see if those trends persist and whether this begins to shift as the Willamette Valley alleyways are cover cropped longer. Finally, 2 more examples. One is we're just collaborating with Dr. Serkanatis at OSU Department of Animal and Rangeland Sciences. We're exploring how protection from agrivoltaics affects forage production, sheep health. We're also in additional study evaluating the effect of diverse forage mixes for cattle and the effects of their health, as well as the soil health. And I'm helping him on a multi-state livestock carbon storage assessment. On the right-hand side is just illustrating another collaboration with our new soil pedologist, Dr. Yakun Zhang with OSU, where she's leveraging all that soil health data I've collected in the hop yards, and she's evaluating spectra-based methodologies as a tool to rapidly estimate those soil health metrics and detect their changes induced by hop management. And then finally, Dr. Dan Manter and myself, another research scientist with ARS in Colorado, we're developing a soil health management index. This is a quantitative system level representation of the combined influence of management practices pertaining to the soil health principles. The goal is to develop a standardized index based exclusively on management data. And the way it's designed is that we can, no matter what the combination and the complexity of all the different management practices that are in place in a particular crop rotation, we can evaluate all of the management systems on an equal footing, regardless of that complexity. And so I won't go into the details, but we have three sub-indices that represent the soil health principles. We tally them up and average them to get an overall soil health management index. And in our version 1 of the soil health management index rating, we found that there was a strong correlation between that management index on the x-axis, ranging from very low to very high, and then our custom and novel molecular index of soil health. And this was at a national level where over 500 soil samples were collected across the country. So we're excited to improve upon this and with more detailed management data as we proceed. And with that, I thank you for your attention. I think I went a couple minutes over. Apologies for that. Here's my email and my phone number, and I look forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Andy Gallagher, and I'm happy to be with you here at the NCSS National Conference. I'm going to start with gratitude because I owe so much to the NCSS. And I want to give special thanks to Ron Reuter, Corey Owens, and Jericho Winter for inviting me to the conference to speak. I'm going to talk about my relationships and experiences with the NCSS in my career. So I started in college, like so many of us do. I went to the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, and I started my first soil survey in Southern Illinois in 1986 and worked there for 2 years. Then I got a job in McHenry County in Northern Illinois and worked as a soil scientist there. Went back to graduate school in the early 90s, got an MS in soil science. My first job out of grad school was as a soil scientist in Alabama. I went down into the South and worked for a couple of years and then moved to Oregon, where I've been since 1997, working as a soil scientist in the private sector and a consultant. So when I think of the NCSS, it's a very broad group of people. And I think one of the important parts of it are the educators, the professors that taught us about soils. And many of them serve as soil judging coaches, as did Doc Bowles at the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, where back in 1985, I competed for a couple of years with soil judging, and many of you in the audience probably did as well. And then when I started working in soil survey, I had some great mentors. I'm the guy who had hair back in 1986 up on top of the pit with my three mentors who all taught me different aspects of soil survey. One, the party leader, was at the end of his career, and the other two were at the beginning, maybe mid-career, and then I was just a greenhorn. But I worked on the soil survey for a couple of years, and this is the NRCS. At the time, it was the SCS, but the mentorship is one of the things that the NCSS has really provided for me and for many soil scientists in their career, and it's a very important part of soil survey. Well, when I was preparing this, I thought, well, what changes have happened I'm starting my 40th year of working as a soil scientist this spring, and what changes? And the first thing, of course, is the obvious one, is technology. Here's a long list of technology that we didn't have any of that in 1986 when I started, and now we use all of these things all the time in soil survey. Of course, one of the products of the NCSS is the soil maps, and for years it was the heavy white paper copies that I lugged around and destroyed, took the covers off of, and photocopied till the end. And now it's just more portable. We have it on our cell phones. We have the World Soil Web, and we have the other products on the computer like Google Earth, where we just have soils information at our fingertips, and GIS programs. But aside from just the tools of the soil survey, it's the people and some of the documentation, like the OSDs. It's something that I just use all the time and would be lost without them. In my career, I've moved around the country, and you change your gas, you change your phone, then you find the OSDs for the place that you moved into. And people from the NRCS and SCS have always been there. When you go to a new state, they're very willing to help. This was the picture is of soil in Alabama. When I was just freshly in Alabama, a state soil scientist, George Montgomery, invited me on a review and took me around and showed me some of these ultrasols, and it was really helpful. The same thing happened in Oregon. I had NRCS soil scientists who would invite me into the field if I called them, and they would point things out, show me some geology, just different geomorphology, and never was refused that service. And so I started my business in 1997, Red Hill Soils, and my clients are vineyards, land use, farms, and research, and mostly order one soil survey. And this is kind of how my business has changed over the years. There's ups and downs, like the vineyard industry is down right now. It was at a peak in the early 2000s, and not too bad in 2015. We had a big recession in 2008, 2009. But you can see this is just kind of how my work is apportioned to different types. This is where I've worked. The big blue balloons are places where I've worked, not all for the same amount of time. But if we narrow into the Pacific Northwest, where I've been for the last 28 years, you can see most of my work has been centered in the Willamette Valley, coastal Oregon, and southern and central Oregon. These are some of the partners that I've made a long list of that I've worked with in soil survey over the years. And I don't intend for you to read all these, but the idea is just that there's so many partners, both in federal, state government, organizations, universities, Oregon Wine Growers Association, corporations that I've worked for. It's a long list. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of quickly go over some of the projects that I've worked on as a soils consultant in the last 20, 30 years. My early work in the private sector was soil mapping at an Order 2 level in Alabama woodlands. I was working for a paper company, and the paper companies were interested in getting their soils mapped, and a lot of it hadn't been mapped yet. And I did that for a couple of years. I hired contractors and kind of oversaw the mapping of the lands in Alabama. And then for a couple of years after I moved to Oregon, I'd still go back to the South and work in the wintertime to make money and to just extend that time of working in the pine forests. Another small project I worked on in 2001, which was a fun project. It was a lot of work, but a lot of fun too, was characterizing soils in the Cascade Mountains. And this was a joint project between the EPA and the U.S. Forest Service. This land wasn't soil mapped yet, and they had identified some areas that they really wanted to kind of tie to soil. So these terrain classes were identified by the geologist from the U.S. Forest Service in Sweet Home, Oregon, and he identified places where he wanted soil profiles, and I went out and described them, sampled them, bulk density, etc. And now this data, these pedons and the data from the lab is part of the NCSS, and you can find it on the soil web. So that was kind of cool for me to find. Speaking of the soil web, this is where I go for soils information. StatsGo, Surgo, it's all there. And I find it easier to use than the Web Soil Survey to go in Google Earth and use the plugin. I like that I can go from this to this, and I can load my data in, and I can put lines on, make topo maps, etc. And this was a partnership between the California Soil Resource Lab and NRCS. And I'm not sure all the details, so those of you who do know, forgive me for that. Vineyard soil mapping is what I do mostly. And site selection is what it's kind of turned into. Originally, I thought I'd be helping people with more management, but finding sites that'll grow grapes, that's really what I do most of the time. Looking at soil properties, I make order one soil maps, and then with my reports, I do interpretations for things that wine growers are interested in. And if you had come to Oregon, I'm sorry you weren't able to come this year, but this is the kind of soil you might see up in our foothills. The Windy Gap silty clay loam is an excellent wine soil. It's well drained, it's got clay, and then the grapes can get their roots down into the siltstone, sandstone. And I'm going fast because I'm just trying to cover a broad swath of things that I do. This is a kind of a map that I would have in my report where I take soil properties and make a model and come up with a vigor index for how much vigor the vine is going to have. The other big type of project I do is land use cases. And in Oregon, we have laws that are based on our statewide planning goals. 3 and 4 are agriculture and forest lands and protecting those. And part of agricultural protection is zoning and use of exclusive farm use in really our best soils. And in that, the definition of a high farmland soil, it varies whether you're in the Willamette Valley or Eastern Oregon. And basically what I do is I go out and make order 1 maps where there's an order 2 or order 3 and better refine the soils. In the report, I'll show what soils were there, what's there now, capability class, and people use these to get a non-farm dwelling or rezoning. Another project I worked for, NRCS actually funded this one, was the Willamette Valley Prairie Soil Project. We had prairie restorers and ecologists who were interested in knowing about soils. And so we set up a project and we went out and sampled prairies, restored prairies that were remnants that hadn't been disturbed much. And we looked at what the soils are and summarized them. And there was also a botanist who would go to the same spot that we did and came up with a report and a GIS layer of where the best prairies are, what the soils are, and what some of the soil properties are. There, I had an intern on this who's now an extension agent in Western Oregon. And Teresa Madison from the local SWCD was the partner who kind of spearheaded the whole thing and got funding, et cetera. She's been a partner with me on many soil projects over the years. And, you know, when we're doing projects like this, of course, we're using NRCS soil survey data. And we use it at different levels. In the Google Earth, I can go just by zooming in or out, I go from StatsGo to Surgo, and then I put my own on-site investigation points on the same map. And it's just made soil mapping so much more fruitful and useful, and the products that I can come up with are pretty cool compared to what I would have thought I could have done back in 1986. A really fun project I worked on was this hop terroir, where we had hop growers who were interested in knowing if there's a connection between the terroir and the hop. We grow a lot of hops in Willamette Valley and also in Yakima Valley in Washington. And terroir is this idea of that the climate, the soil, the management all influence the product. And there's terroir in many things, coffee, tea, oak. We had a team that was sponsored by Coleman Agriculture, a big hop producer in Western Oregon, and a team from OSU in hop chemistry, hop breeding, soil science. And I got involved. I did the soil classification at all the different sites that we looked at. And it was a 4-year project, first couple of years just in Oregon, and then we expanded it to include Yakima Valley. And this is a picture showing the difference. Yakima Valley, very dry, Western Oregon, Willamette Valley, very wet, and two big hop growing areas. Was there a difference in the terroir? That was the question that we were asking. And you can see 45 inches of rain in Willamette Valley, 9 inches in Yakima. We have xeric moisture regime and mollisols in Willamette Valley with 45 inches of rain. Then you go to Yakima and we've got iridosols. And they're both formed in the Missoula floods, which Scott Burns talked about in his talk. And in some of these vineyards, some of these hop yards, I made maps. I had enough holes that I could actually remap it, and we used that for site selection. We wanted to make sure we had the same hop variety and similar soils when we made the comparisons. And then they did a raft of analysis, both chemistry and sensory tasting. I got to taste the different beers that they made with the hops. And that was a really great project. And another project that I've been working on with Teresa Madison, again, is looking at soil health. This is something we didn't talk about when I started soil mapping in the 80s. And now it's a very big topic. And we get to go out and in this project, Teresa's doing a bunch of soil health measurements on different farms. And I would pull a soil core and classify the soil. And all her data, all her samples are going into a big soil health database. And the fun thing about this project is working with farmers. And I really have enjoyed it. And this is kind of a little pet project I have where I take a picture at each farm with the farmer. And they're always smiling when they are holding their soil profile. I pull this with a bucket auger. We did the same thing in another project. This was a grant written by the American Farmland Trust and the Dry Farm Institute. It's called Advancing Water Resilient Strategies. We worked with small farmers in 3 states and, trying to help them cope with some of the problems that we expect to be having as water's running out. We have water issues for a number of reasons. One being climate. Another could be just local legislation on water resources. And we would go to their farm and I would classify the soil. I'd give them a report of how much, water holding capacity, et cetera, is there. And so I know this was fast. There's a lot of different projects I get to work on. And I guess one of the big changes I've had since 1986 is I used to think I've got to work with people. I was kind of a typical soil scientist, if there's that I was kind of an introvert. I like to be by myself. So now I think I get to work. And that's been a big change for me. And I think for the NCSS, we have got to work with people and we get to work with people. And that's all I have for you today. Hopefully there'll be some questions in the end. Thank you.